Mr. Luisen.
So I declare my interest as the Chief Executive of ACRES, an animal protection charity, the same ACRES that my GRC colleague Libiwa was talking about. But perhaps I should start by thanking her for sharing the extensive list of animals we have in Yishun and the amazing biodiversity we have. I think SPS will reply to some of the concerns she's raised, but I would like to add that perhaps we have so many rats also because we have removed all the pythons who eat the rats. But sir, I have spent more than half of my life, over 20 years, speaking up for animals and giving them a voice. I have to say that this merger of AVA and NParks is good news for the animal protection community. It addresses a significant problem we face on the ground. Many times we respond to feedback related to monkeys, for example. If that particular monkey is in a nature reserve, we will inform NParks. As we wait for NParks officers to arrive, the monkey moves, sometimes just by a few meters, and ends up outside the nature reserve. We then have to inform AVA. There was once the monkey was at a bus stop, like Engineer Libiwa has said, and we were told to inform LTA instead. As these animals are quite mobile, things can get quite complicated with multiple agencies involved. Thus, the move to combine all non-food, plant and animal-related functions is very much a welcome one. This will enable a more unified and coherent approach. I stand in support of this bill, but would like to seek a few clarifications. First, I would like to seek clarifications for the rationale for limiting the definition of animal. The definition of animal under the current Act, which references the Parks and Trees Act, include, quote, any other living creature, vertebrate or invertebrate, unquote. Basically, it includes everything. The proposed new definition is more restricted. The word invertebrate is no longer there. Anthropods are now included in the definition of animals, but they are invertebrates that are not anthropods. This includes cnidarians such as jellyfishes and annelids such as earthworms and leeches. Can SPS clarify the rationale for limiting the definition of animals in this way? What prompted this change? Next, the positive aspect of this merger is that it will create synergy. We are merging so that instead of two organizations, we have one organization focused on animal and plant issues. I thus find it strange that after this merger, we then split the Director General's duties. Instead of one DG, we will have 4 DG positions. A DG for Animal Health and Welfare, a DG for Wildlife Management, a DG for Wildlife Trade Control, and a DG for Plant Health. While I understand that the DG for Animal Health and Welfare and the DG for Wildlife Management will be the same person, the DG for Wildlife Trade Control will be a different person. Why are we merging and then splitting? I find this will complicate things on the ground again. For example, many wildlife trafficking cases involve both species protected under CITES and under the Endangered Species Import-Export Act, and also species not protected by CITES that fall under the Wild Animals and Birds Act. There's often animal cruelty involved as well, and that offence will fall under the Animals and Birds Act. Prior to all the changes, this case would have been covered by one DG. Now, it will involve 3 DGs. Would this not be a waste of resources? Do officers handling the case have to send reports to different DGs, and the DGs will then have to meet to discuss the case? Can SPS clarify how the DGs will work together now, and whether there will be separate lines of reporting for enforcement officers? Lastly, I would like to focus on the issue that I've raised many times in this House, culling. Whenever we have animal-related nuisance complaints or feedback, culling seems to be the solution. Be it chickens or monkeys or birds or wild boars, we have culled them. We have made progress on this front, as SPS has mentioned, and now have good TNRM programs for dogs and cats, which focus on more humane, scientific and long-term solutions. These programs addresses both residents' concerns and animal welfare concerns. I hope that with this merger, with NParks' strong background in science, we will start to develop more holistic, science-based management approaches towards managing animal populations in Singapore. So we've been culling animals for decades. I ask that we look at this not just from an animal welfare perspective, but also look at it from an effectiveness perspective. Culling has clearly not worked. If culling worked, we would not have the same animal-related problems in the same areas year after year. We spent tons of resources, including financial resources, on a solution that doesn't seem to produce results. Can SPS also confirm whether there are any scientific studies that show that our current culling measures work? As a biologist by training and having done a literature review, I have found no scientific studies that support our current culling measures, certainly there are no scientific studies that suggest culling based on public complaints is effective. In fact, there is scientific research that shows the contrary, that culling not only fails to reduce the population, it actually leads to an increase. We have to understand that with our current measures, while there is a clear reduction in numbers following a cull, at times within a few weeks, with pigeons for example, the pigeon numbers may be back to the pre-cull numbers and at times exceed it. Why? Because we usually kill the adult birds, who may be the non-breeding birds. The younger, healthier, stronger breeding birds survive the cull. According to the Pigeon Control Advisory Service, quote, pigeons control their own numbers very effectively according to the volume of food available to them. An adult pair of pigeons will usually breed 4 to 6 times a year, but can breed more frequently in optimum conditions, producing 2 young each time. If, however, the food supply reduces and there is only sufficient food available to support the existing flock, adult birds may only breed once or twice a year, or possibly not at all. Pigeons will not breed if there is insufficient food to service the needs of their young. If food supply increases for any reason, following a cull for example, pigeons will breed continuously until the flock reaches the point where it is fully exploiting the food available to it. In other words, there is a minor population explosion each time a cull takes place. The end result is an estimated 50 to 30% increment in flock size over and above the pre-cull figure, unquote. So many others have used culling as a solution and have found as well that it doesn't work. In the city of Basel, for example, they had 20,000 pigeons in 1963. Over a period of 24 years of intensive culling, they killed 100,000 pigeons. In 1988, they did a count. Instead of having 20,000 pigeons, they now had 30,000 pigeons. Despite the culling, the population increased by 33%. Clearly, culling didn't work. The city of Basel then focused on a public awareness campaign to address the public feeding of pigeons. It installed pigeon laws, removed the pigeons' eggs, and controlled the availability of food. Within 4.5 years, the city's pigeon population reduced to 10,000 birds. Some culling continued during this period, but that was to prevent the birds from starving to death due to the lack of food. This is very different from the culling that takes place in Singapore, which takes place in response to public complaints. The culling of monkeys is similarly ineffective, as it's usually the young ones who get trapped. The mother monkey who lost her young goes into heat again, the male mates with her, and another baby is born, replacing the monkey who was killed. If we somehow manage to kill an entire troop, the neighboring troop will then take over the territory of the troop who were killed. With more resources, they breed more, and sooner or later, we will have the same number of monkeys again. So I can go on and on about this. Culling ignores the science and puts a burden on valuable government resources. I sincerely hope that we can move forward on this issue and that SPS can share more about how NParks intends to manage the animal populations in Singapore. So this bill is much needed and opens a new and exciting chapter in the animal protection movement in Singapore. When this merger was first announced, there were some concerns as to whether it was really true. Is this really happening? Or was this fake news? The problem is that it was announced that the merger will take place on 1st April, on April Fool's Day. I hope that the public is now assured that this isn't a joke, and perhaps that is really happening, and maybe SPS can also provide some assurances on that. So notwithstanding my clarifications, I stand in support of this bill.